The 2014 NASCAR champion Kevin Harvick announces his retirement after 23 full-time seasons. We'll talk about what that means for him and what that means for that Stewart Haas Racing organization moving in the future. And Kyle Larson is running in the Indianapolis 500. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and we have a ton of news to talk about today. A lot of breaking news coming at us kind of quick here during the offseason. I was not planning on making an episode today, but earlier today we had Kevin Harvick announce his retirement. That's obviously huge news, star driver with a whole lot of success. Then we had Kyle Larson kind of unexpectedly announced he's running the 2024 Indianapolis 500. We had a couple of days ago, Jimmie Johnson announced he's driving the 84 car, what will be renamed Legacy Motor Club, what was formerly known as Petty GMS. I just made a video on Petty GMS earlier this week, so a whole lot of news was kind of coming at us there as we are 38 days away from the start of the 2023 NASCAR season. The Daytona 500 just right around the corner. And let's go ahead and get into all the news. Let's try to squeeze it into one episode of Dirty Air here. We got a lot of exciting news to get into. So first off, I want to talk about Kevin Harvick because he has announced his retirement. This is not a super surprise announcement. I think a lot of fans knew, at least had an idea, that 2023 could possibly be his final year after signing that 2-year deal a couple of seasons ago with Stewart Haas Racing. Then we, of course, had a clip of his fire suit come out and showed that Forever was on it. A lot of fans saw that and said, oh, he must be retiring. And then I think they took that post back off of Twitter, which kind of, solidified that he's most likely retiring. But today, we got the official announcement that Kevin Harvick is retiring from full-time competition after 2023. So what does that mean for him? What does that mean for Stewart Haas Racing moving in the future? I think that's really exciting for Kevin Harvick because Kevin Harvick obviously has a son now, has a daughter, wants to spend a lot of time with them, and I hope he's able to spend a lot of time with them. I know Keelan, his son, is really into racing, starting to take that pretty serious. I think he's getting pretty old. I don't know if he's a teenager yet. He might be 10 or 11 years old, so getting up there, starting to, learn a lot, take things pretty serious. It'll be really fun to watch him, see how far he can go in his NASCAR career. I'm sure having Kevin Harvick as a mentor is not a disadvantage whatsoever, considering how talented Kevin Harvick is, and we'll see if he can, show Keelan a lot of those tips on how to be a great race car driver. That should be a lot of fun to watch and see what Keelan's able to do in the future. And it'll be fun to see Kevin Harvick kind of behind the scenes helping him out with his racing career. Obviously, he's still got his daughter, he's still got his wife, and all that stuff's very important to Kevin Harvick, I'm sure. So stepping away from full-time competition, which is, a full-time job, it's so much stress, and it's so hard to win these races, and you have to put a whole lot of time and effort into it. I'm glad to see Kevin Harvick, after 23 full-time seasons, take a step back and maybe, take life in the slow lane for a little bit. Enjoy life a little bit more, and that should be fun to do for him. And I hope all that goes very well. I do want to talk a little bit about Kevin Harvick's success, though. I mentioned at the start of the show the 2014 NASCAR champion. Right when he went to Stewart Haas Racing, he's been the premier driver there since he went to Stewart Haas Racing in 2014. Immediately won the championship. Usually wins the most races that year. Won 8 races back in 2020. Won a couple of races last year. Has a few seasons where he's won 8 races at Stewart Haas Racing. So obviously the premier driver over there for quite some time. The 2007 Daytona 500 winner back when he was racing for RCR. So a whole lot of success for Kevin Harvick. I mentioned 60 wins. You can go down the stat sheet. Usually when we go to some of the racetracks, you talk about Kevin Harvick like at Darlington or at a Bristol or at Richmond or at Michigan especially. They're like, Kevin Harvick has 8 wins here. I believe he has 8 wins at Michigan. Just impressive stats like that at a lot of the racetracks you go to. I think he's got a whole bunch of wins at Richmond, at Darlington. I know he's won a whole bunch. I don't know the actual numbers, but a whole lot of races won there. So it's exciting to see that, and we'll see that in his final year. We'll be able to go to those racetracks and hear about all the races he won, and hopefully he gets a few more races because Kevin Harvick is still at the top of his game. The second half of last year, which I really like to divide the NASCAR season, especially in 2022, by 2. The second half of last year, he showed a whole lot of speed and run very consistently at the end. So it'll be exciting to see what he can do in the future. But that does raise the question for Stewart Haas Racing. I did say Kevin Harvick has been the premier driver over there at Stewart Haas Racing for years now, for almost a decade now. What's going to happen moving forward? Who's going to drive the number 4 car? What's going to happen moving forward for that organization? I just talked about on Monday all these teams with superstar driver lineups. All these great driver lineups like Noah Gragson for Petty GMS, Jimmie Johnson, Eric Jones, Kyle Busch going to RCR. with Stewart Haas Racing, I don't really see that. I don't know who's going to take over the 4 car. You've got Cole Custer in the Xfinity Series. He actually had to move down after having a pretty disappointing start to his Cup Series career. But like I said, it takes a few years to get used to things. So with the experience, that could be the best decision to put Cole Custer in the seat. But outside of him, he's got to be the top prospect, because outside of him right now, at least, I know the Cup Series, a lot of crazy things can happen during the year, during the silly season, but right now, I don't know any really Cup prospects to look at. I mean, nobody's really on a contract season. I think Denny Hamlin's on a contract year, but we know he's not going to go drive a Ford over at Stewart Haas and or anything of that nature. I think Truex might be on a contract year, so who knows? But I think right now Cole Custer is obviously the top prospect. But, Stewart Haas Racing has Ryan Preece moving up next year, filling in Cole Custer's spot this year. I think that's a pretty good driver. When he raced for JTD Doherty Racing a couple of years ago, he actually run pretty well. That was a car that probably shouldn't have been in the top 5, probably shouldn't have been in the top 10 on a weekly basis. And if he didn't finish in the top 10 on a weekly basis, he got a few top 10s, which was really impressive in that 37 car, because, the drivers that run that car before really didn't show the speed that he had. And Ryan Preece, obviously with success in the Xfinity Series, I think he could be a real threat in the Cup Series as well for Stewart Haas. I'm glad to see him back in the Cup Series. I think he deserves a ride. I remember being a little bit disappointed when he lost that ride, so I'm glad to see him back in the Cup Series. It'll be fun to see what Ryan Preece can do. Obviously, we have Eric Almirola signed up. It was a year ago, about this time, I was announcing or talking about his retirement from the Cup Series. Apparently, he signed a multi-year deal, from what I understand. So you have Eric Almirola to stick around a few more years. He's won a few races at a few different types of racetracks. He's obviously a pretty experienced driver, knows how to get these things done, and can help some of these younger drivers coming up, if that is Cole Custer or Ryan Preece, still one of those younger drivers. So it should be exciting to see the future for Stewart Haas Racing upcoming. I think right now they're kind of at a low point right now. We haven't seen them win a whole lot of races the last few years. I know Chase Briscoe had a really good season last year, made it all the way to the second to last round of the playoffs, a round of 8, won a race at Phoenix, came close to making it to the championship at Martinsville, led a few laps at the end. So Chase Briscoe, obviously a pretty underexperienced driver in the Cup Series. He's going to gain some of that experience moving forward, and he should be exciting to watch, especially, and he's got a lot of sponsors backing Chase Briscoe up as well. So the future for Stewart Haas Racing is definitely bright, even though you're losing your star driver, potentially one of the best drivers ever, not only at Stewart Haas, but in NASCAR history. Losing one of those is definitely not too big of a down spot, considering you do have a lot of young talent for that team. So I'm not too concerned for Stewart Haas Racing right now. Like I said, they're obviously not where they need to be at this moment, but they got a lot of up-and-coming stars. We've seen this happen with other teams. We're kind of starting to see it with Joe Gibbs Racing right now as well. We saw it with Hendrick. Look at how good they are right now. They've won 2 championships. They won 2 championships in a row a couple of years ago. So, Hendrick Motorsports went through that same type deal. Speaking of Hendrick Motorsports, let's talk about a Hendrick Motorsports driver, Kyle Larson. I just saw this report from Fox Sports or Fox NASCAR here that Kyle Larson will run the 2024 Indianapolis 500 for McLaren Racing. I'm not too familiar with McLaren Racing. I'm assuming they're a pretty decent IndyCar team. It should be a lot of fun to see what Kyle Larson can do. But Kyle Larson has said in the past that he wants to be one of the best drivers in the world. You've seen this with him racing on dirt. He races plenty of dirt races throughout the week. When he was not racing in the 2020 Cup Series, he raced plenty of dirt races, plenty of short tracks all around the country, winning all those races. He's won plenty of NASCAR races at a variety of different racetracks. You go back to that 2021 season when he got 10 wins, won the championship, so already impressive career in NASCAR for Kyle Larson. But if he wants to be the best driver in the world, you're going to have to win races or at least compete in races like the Indianapolis 500. Is there a shot that he wins it? Probably not. It takes a whole lot of IndyCar practice to be able to win one of those races because it takes a lot of talent to win at that level. But Kyle Larson, at least running in it, is a positive thing to put on his resume. He's run the Indy 500. We've seen this with other drivers in the past. Mario Andretti's one of the only drivers to win the Indy 500 and the Daytona 500. Kyle Larson obviously still has a ton of time to get that Daytona 500 win. We saw it with Kurt Busch a few years ago. He run the Coke 600 and the Indy 500 in the same year. And, of course, we saw Jimmy Johnson run the Indy 500 last year. And, unfortunately, he almost made it to the end but got in an accident right at the end of that Indy 500. So that should be fun. 2024, I'm not sure why it wasn't 2023. Obviously, I don't know all the sponsorship deals and how all the contracts and stuff work out, but that seems like a long ways away. We're not even really close to the 2023 Indy 500, so we got a while till he races that Indy 500 in 2024, but it should be exciting to see what he's able to do. And yeah, that's good. NASCAR drivers branching out to other series, kind of promoting NASCAR in a way, for sure, during IndyCar's biggest race of the year. So that should be really exciting to see. I'm looking forward to that in the 2024 Indy 500. Speaking of Jimmy Johnson, I mentioned he ran the Indy 500 last year. He had some news to release. You're looking at it here. This is actually the car. This was Carvana posted this on Twitter earlier today. This looks like this is going to be Jimmy Johnson's paint scheme for at least the Daytona 500 is what I'm speculating, because they said they will be on board for Daytona. They released this photo of a design car. It looks pretty cool. I know Carvana's followed him with IndyCar. I don't think they were ever in NASCAR with Jimmy Johnson, but they followed him over to IndyCar. Now they're taking that sponsorship over to NASCAR, over to the Daytona 500, which is a positive for Jimmy Johnson, of course, and a positive for Carvana, I'm sure. Obviously, they're getting their money's worth, or feel like they're getting their money worth out of this motorsport sponsorship. And then, of course, it's a positive for NASCAR to be bringing in more sponsors. So Jimmy Johnson kind of helping out NASCAR here, bringing in another sponsor. We'll see how they like the NASCAR Cup Series, how they like big events like the Daytona 500 in front of big crowds on TV and big crowds in the grandstand, obviously. So it should be exciting. By the way, they did rename Petty GMS. I just made a video on Petty GMS earlier this week. I did not know they were going to rename the team, but they did announce that they renamed it to Legacy Motor Club. I kind of like that. I think it rolls off the tongue pretty good. I saw a few guys didn't really like, a few people on the internet that were vocal didn't really like the name too much. They didn't like that Petty was not in the name. But I still think it rolls off the tongue really well. I'm sure you're still going to see the 43 and the 42 and think of Richard Petty and think of Lee Petty and all that in NASCAR. So it's definitely exciting. It'll be exciting to see what that team can do moving forward and how Jimmy Johnson can help that team moving forward in the 84 car. So that's definitely interesting. I like how they, for the 84 car, kind of flipped the number. He was 48 and then switched it to 84. That's kind of cool. And I believe he's also has 83 wins in the Cup Series, so chasing 84. So if he does get a win, which I hate to be that guy, but I don't see it happening. But if he is able to get a win in one of his, I think there's supposed to be 5 Cup starts this year, that would be 84 wins in the 84 car. That would be impressive and fun to watch as well. So a lot to look forward to for 2023. Like I said, 38 days away from the Daytona 500, so it should be exciting. That's really all there is to talk about after a ton of news comes filing on us today. But it's exciting. I hope you guys continue to watch the show. Like and subscribe if you like the video, obviously. And then, of course, let's get rowdy.